It's midday right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Welcome to Lunchtime Politics. I'm Jeffrey Uzoma. Let's bring you the headlines in just a moment. National Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers suspend industrial action following a resolution with Dangote Refinery and Petrochemical to allow willing workers join sectors unions without victimization. Federal government says no plan to implement the 5% fuel tax by January 2026, although the law provides for it in future, as Nigerians vehemently kick against the policy, insist it's too much burden on citizens. Worrying signals coming from the electricity sector over increasing legacy debt to generating companies and exits of premium customers from national grid to alternative sources. An expert joins me to break it down in just a moment. Thanks again for joining us on the program, where we'll give you all access pass to what's happening in the polity and in politics at midday. And let's get started with that resolution that was brokered between the National Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers suspending its strike, which was triggered by a dispute between its members and the management of the Dangote Refinery. The decision followed a closed-door meeting at the Department of State Services headquarters, that's the DSS headquarters, attended by representatives of both parties, along with the Minister of Finance, in a joint statement signed by the representative of Dangote Group, Otumba Jibrin, as well as the President and General Secretary of NUPENG. The union announced that the strike was suspended after the refinery's management agreed to respect workers' rights to unionize. Efforts to resolve the impasse on Monday by the Minister of Labor and Employment had earlier ended in a deadlock. However, a joint intervention by the Finance Minister and the DSS and the Labor Minister ultimately led to the breakthrough. Now, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Waledu, has clarified that there are no plans, immediate plans, to implement the proposed 5% tax on petroleum products. Speaking to reporters in Abuja, the minister explained that while the policy is provided for under the Nigerian Tax Administration Act and is scheduled to take effect from January 1st, 2026, its implementation will only proceed after consultations with stakeholders.
The tax reform bills and the Tax Act will not become operational until 2026, January 1, 2026. And the 5% fuel surcharge, which is mentioned therein, will not automatically come into effect. There's even a process. Before any such charge can come into effect, it requires a commencement order from the Honorable Minister of Finance. And this indeed must be published in a gazette. So it's not automatic that we wake up on January 1 and there's a new tax and it's going to be levied. No, there's a whole formal process involved. And as of today, no order has been issued, none is being prepared, and there is no plan. There's no immediate plan to implement any surcharge.
Let me bring in my guest. Olabode Shomi is an energy expert. He joins us from Abuja studio. Mr. Shomi, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good afternoon. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Mr. Shomi, I know that I brought you to talk electricity, but this tax matter, this fuel tax matter concerns all of us. So it's soothing to hear the minister say, look, there is no such plan yet. If I have to do it, we will consult widely. But the argument is to the effect that when that law came into effect in 2007 under FEMA to help, take care of our roads, as at then Nigeria was paying subsidies. So this was citizens some way of supporting the government. Now that subsidy is gone, citizens are saying, let it be gone as well. We don't even want to hear it, whether by proclamation or any form. What do you make of this back and forth?
Okay, so when it comes to financial matters, whether they be taxes, whether they be subsidies, whether they be charges or the related, there's usually an anchoring financial and economic principle behind it. And no surprise, I'm not a financial expert or an economist by any chance. But having said that, there are some things we can logically put into place as citizens and as people who are on the ground. The fact of the matter is that the nature of the reforms that the current administration has gone on has been a bit, for want of a better word, stinging financially, stinging in terms of the lives of people. So it is normal for there to be a pushback in circumstances like this. And I think that that is to be expected. So there's a socio-political aspect to it. There's the fact that the government, within their own nature, wants to draw in as much money as possible. And there's the fact that the citizenry, within their own nature, want to resist putting in as much money as possible. So a good balance will always be that the current income that the government has, which is significant considering all the things that have happened and even the partial implementation of the tax law, can be such that let there be a feel, let there be an impact in the lives of people before additional taxes can come in. I mean, that's just logical. It's logical from a social, political point of view. It's logical from an economic point of view. And it stands to test to get the government and the governed to be closer. That would be my own view on that.
Yes, I'm not going to belabor the matter on you on this one. Let me stick to why I invited you. That has to do with the electricity sector. When I looked at some of the reports that came in fact, why I had to say let's have this conversation is what can be considered a worrying sign or worrying signs in a sector that is already bedeviled by a couple of legacy issues, including liabilities. In terms of financial liabilities. The Gencos here, in fact, that particular headline from one of the dailies, I think the Guardian says, National Grid faces 5.6 trillion naira revenue loss as premium customers exit. First, it looks like a good and a bad thing at the same time. What do I mean by that? Bad thing in the sense that these liabilities are, encumbrances on their books and it's going to affect their operations. On the other hand, it looks like the situation we found ourselves has now forced some persons to say, if we have alternative, why are we putting our load on the national grid? Help us unpack what is playing out here. Maybe put some figure to it for us as well.
Okay, thank you. So it's first of all important to understand how the pricing of electricity works from a holistic point of view. Now, in the moment, one of the things that we see is that there's a band in terms of payments. So there's a band, A who pays slightly more and all that. The reason behind that speaks to why the high-paying customers, the high-value customers are necessary. The people at the bottom of the pyramid, which is where the household is, they don't necessarily pay what it takes to sustain the grid. The bulk of the sustenance of the grid comes from industries. They come from factories. Those are the people that pay a little bit more than everybody else, and they consume a bit more than everybody else. So while it may be true that there's more electricity to go into homes and there's more electricity to last a little longer, the implication is that it's going to cost a bit more, maybe a significantly larger amount. So that's the thing, because one of the fundamentals that we seem to forget is that it is incumbent upon everybody to understand how the industry works. And that way, we can have realistic expectations and realistic demands. The second part of it is how the privatization itself took place. At the point of privatization, the discos were told that there is a particular amount of electricity available to them. And that electricity was such that that was the basis coming up with this at the initial. But when they resumed work, when they resumed the operations, the amount of electricity that was available was their business plan could not work pari passu what they met on ground. That is important to note. So at this stage with this development, it means that the business plan with which they started operations has even suffered a greater setback, because right now there can be further planning because the key customers who kind of like are the levers that stabilize the grid are starting to pull out. There are many reasons for that. There's enough blame to go around everybody. There's a blame for the user, there's a blame for the gencos, there's a blame for the discos, there's a blame for government. But the issue is that the blame game does not solve the problem. So the focus, rather than be on the blame and looking for somebody that will be a scapegoat, will be better to solve the problem. Speak to some of these users, understand what it is in terms of their pain, and then look at how there can be a meeting of minds. Let us not kid ourselves. The grid, the system requires these users for it to be functional. I am yet to see a way in which there will be practical functionality if all these people exit. And that's just the truth of the matter.
That's why I use the word worrying sign. So let's put some data to it. From what you know as an expert, how much power do we need to be able to power Nigeria? Let me ask it from a layman's perspective. Because we have all these comparison dashboards that we compare SA, New York, and all of these places to Nigeria. How much power do we need to say Nigeria is now stable in terms of our power supply? How much do we need? And then what level of funding? I know that the Honorable Minister for Power had put some figure, I can't remember the exact figure. Consistently, do we need to be able to achieve that, and how long will it take? So let's do some milestone setting.
Okay, so first of all, the amount of power we need is something nobody really knows in exact figures.
Maybe
it is basically estimates, and they are estimates based on the estimated amount of households we have and the estimated amount of industries that are likely to come up and all that. So I'm not sure I have the exact figure off the top of my head, but I do know that even if a figure were arrived at today, because we are a growing nation, every day people come out of the university, people start to live their lives and all that. Everybody that graduates today is a potential house owner. And when he moves out to get his own house, whether as a single person or as a married couple and all that, they add to the demands of electricity. So I think the figures for South Africa, if memory serves me correctly, is about 50 gigahertz. And that should be something around what we can look at. I don't want to guess a figure because at the time I used to have that off the top of my hand, but I can't remember that now. So I don't want to get a figure. But I'll say that with around 50 megahertz, we should, at least with the household demand, we should at the household level be able to get sufficient electricity and stable electricity, which will be what everybody really, really wants.
So as we speak now, we're worlds apart from destination by maybe this rough estimate you've given that we revolve. I think we did a record 6,000 megawatts the other day, or I think last year or sometime this year, 5,000 to 6,000 megawatts. And we're literally celebrating. And I'm wondering, that's okay. It's great that we broke through, but it's not really something to be excited about because I think we have about, from the records we have, about between 11 to 13,000 installed megawatt capacity, but we're already doing just barely half of that. So let's talk about the funding part, which is a critical part of this conversation, because one of the things that the government touted, I remember vividly during the campaign seasons, I think I even did a report, when the president, now president, then candidate Bola Tinubu was at the Chatham House. He clearly said, if I remember his words very well, he said, the current model is broken and he's going to fix it in terms of electricity. And now he's done all this decentralization to the states and subnational. Now, when you look at what has been done so far, one of the things that was touted why the tariff had to be, dichotomized, ban A, ban B, ban all of that, and then some people will pay more than the other persons, is because they wanted liquidity in the system. Now that liquidity is threatened by this pullout, whether by manufacturers or by premium customers, what is left of investor sentiment?
Well, that's as they say in local parlance, that's a jam question. The truth is that when investors invest, yes, they look at your books, they look at all that, but investors ultimately invest in people. So there must be a connect with the person who is pushing for the investment to show that this person, if we don't invest in this person, we're losing out. Or this person has a certain energy that can carry the issues. At the moment, or at any time, since the privatization, the books never really looked that good. So people who invested, they invested for other reasons other than the things that we saw. But more importantly, that showed where there were limited investment options. So as it is just another nail in a very, very dire situation. Yes, there were band A, band B, band C customers, but even that increment was not enough to ensure liquidity in the sector to the extent that we are talking about. And it's just about looking at the numbers. So I think stakeholders, whether from the regulator to the discos and all that, owe it to the Nigerian citizenry to have capsules of information, whether on social media, that will explain the liquidity of the sector. Because if people don't fully understand what is happening and what they are facing, they cannot, the word is not empathized, they will not understand the runnings of the industry. And if they don't understand the runnings of the industry, every step to make progress will be resisted and seen as anti-people. The third part of it is that if every step to make progress is seen as anti-people, they will not be able to do it, and ultimately the industry will collapse. And there is no gainsaying if under a regulator who is an ombudsman, an industry collapse, what would they have been claimed to have done? So there is a need for a balance. The regulator, without any doubt, has their work cut out for them. They have issues that they are facing, they have realities that they need to deal with. But, which is a big but, there are fundamentals that they must take. There are fundamental decisions they must make, fundamental things that they must do, so that the industry does not collapse under their watch. As it is, whichever way, this is a turning point in terms of how electricity market is going to operate in the country. What is important is that the existing industries and all that do not collapse. Because at the end of the day, the investor can always carry his bag and say, well, we made a bad investment and move on. But it becomes a social and a political issue if in Nigeria we don't have light, if we have a national grid. So that, in that case, it becomes a responsibility of government. So everybody has their work cut out for them, and they must fix it. Because if they don't fix it, the implications are more than that of the industry. So there are things that people have been hiding away from for a long time: proper audit of the discos, proper connection, so many things. And this is now the time to look into those things so that the realities can be such that there will be progress.
Mr. Shomi, you've raised, in fact, you added political. Let me even make it, I don't want to use the word more alarming, more worrying, is national security. Because when you talk about productivity and production, it sits on what I'll call a tripod. Central to that tripod is power infrastructure. You have scalability, human capital development on one end of that tripod. You have technology on the other end of that tripod. But central to all of this is the infrastructure called electricity. Without electricity, I don't know what we're going to be doing. In fact, the report says that GENCOs may float grid collapse order because of some of these challenges we're talking about here. So how do we now manage and walk around the fine lines of this crisis? From the consumer's point of view, I can say power has increased where I live. It's just that it's costing me a lot, man. It's really biting hard. You know, I barely use my generator because I have power to a large extent. But not everybody can say that. Maybe majority cannot say that. So how do we help the citizens to understand? Because as you said, the citizens are really angry. Things are hard. Adding additional bodies is another thing. Now to tell them that this is going to happen if they don't pay more. How do we navigate these complexities?
So there's no shortcut to education. I think it was Awolowo also, one of the leaders during the the pre-independence Nigeria, that said that an educated populace and educated people are easy to lead but impossible to drive. An uneducated populace are hard to lead but very easy to drive. If the people get educated in terms of the fundamentals of what makes the industry work, it will be easier for them to be carried along and all the negative energy can dissipate. It is because the leadership within the within the power sector does not understand, or I won't say do not understand, do not appreciate that leadership of this industry is as political as running for the office. So in all their decisions, it is not just about doing the right thing, it is also about being seen to do the right thing. So for the people, just like INEC does voter education, telling people what they need to, the reasons why they should vote for people that are going to govern them, there may be a need for educational capsules that will come maybe at town hall level and at various levels, explaining to people how this industry works. Because if you talk to the average guy on the street, whether on the market anywhere, and you say, the power sector is this, you say, I don't care. All I want is power. It sounds nice, but it is ignorant. So what the industry is facing is an ignorant populace who is impatient. So there must be some amount of education to people because of the political aspect, such that the people can understand. And it is that understanding that will make leadership easy. I mean, I don't, for my own end, I don't see any which way that is going to provide a lasting solution and a realistic solution to this.
So as we begin to wind down, let's talk about incentivizing the people who are providing this power in the first place. There's a way policy can be rejigged, walked around, go around the law without necessarily breaking the law, maybe go over the law or under the law without necessarily breaking the law, incentivizing, because they pay taxes, they pay all of this. What can the government do in terms of policy to be able to incentivize the sector? Besides paying their own liabilities, that is also a big problem because the liabilities are huge. Those numbers are not good. Okay, so first of all, we have policies, we have regulations, we have laws. Those are the instruments of governance. To make this point, I would like to say a little story. I used to work for Ericsson, and at a point in time, I was in the Ericsson offices in New York, where we were responsible for government relations, and some of all those things. In the US Congress, they have something they call Industry Day, in which case it's a day for a particular industry where the people in that industry, the leadership of that industry, interacts with members of Congress and they discuss the issues that they face in the Congress. So what they have done is to create a time or a moment where they can discuss or interact with industry people that is not adversarial. We need to realize that by the nature of the legislature, most of the time that they call for people within the industry is when there's an investigation or when there's an oversight and all that, in which case both parties have an adversarial environment. So they created that space for them to understand the industry so that when they are making laws, those laws will not be negative or impact the industry negatively. So there must be so laws are made for man. Man are not made for laws. So if there are any laws that is antagonistic to progress as at now, it is incumbent upon us to change those laws. We do not have to bend over laws that are not making progress. That does not mean that the current law, which is the Electricity Act, which is about a year, is not sufficient. That's not saying that.
In fact, it takes care of a lot of things. But the law itself should not be an hindrance to what will bring progress. So it is for revenue assurance strategies, or revenue assurance formulas, or revenue assurance policies to be set up so that it will calm the revenue streams for the discos, who ultimately are the source of revenue for the whole industry. So in simple terms, revenue assurance speaks to a system or a formula or a strategy where revenue of some amount is guaranteed. At the moment, a lot of the revenue is not guaranteed, so that's why there are a lot of sharp practices, because there must be something that will allow them to plan. That revenue assurance is what needs to be worked on. It is what will ensure liquidity and stability in liquidity within the industry. When there's liquidity within the industry, other things can come into place. But until then, it becomes a push and pull, fight me, I fight you kind of situation.
All right, Mr. Shomi, it was great to have you explain and break these things down for us. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise. Olabode Shomi is an energy expert who joined us from our Abuja studios. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure.
And that's it on the program. Thanks for your time and your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Zonga. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics. Bye-bye.